So welcome to the History Optional DAMP program, day 4. Today's question is apparently very simple, and I'm sure as we go along in next few half an hour, 40 minutes or so, we will come to know that it is actually not so simple. Let me read the question for you. To what extent you give credit to Mesopotamian trade for Harappan urbanization? Now, from the answer writing perspective, some things are very obvious, as we just discussed, that whenever you see to what extent, this phrase gives you an idea that you have to go into argumentation. It generally translates into our body structure, not only, but also. So we might say, we might be tempted to take a stance that Mesopotamian trade may have some role to play, but it is not the only positive agent. And there are a host of other factors, and the process of urbanization is always very complex. It is a good stance to take, good approach, good structure, not only first part, but also, and then you have conclusion. And such kind of structure comes very handy because this issue of urbanization is not only restricted to Harappa. In our syllabus, we come across the similar debate again in the 6th century BCE when we have second urbanization. This is a Bronze Age, that is an Iron Age. The same issue again reappears in South India during Sangam era, and UPSC has asked a question on that. That topic has also become very important in last couple of years with discoveries in Tamil Nadu. Again, the debate reappears in the post-Gupta era in the context of so-called feudalism thesis and deurbanization debate. That is the third one. The fourth time it comes again in just a moment. Yeah, it comes again in the Delhi Sultanate era. The question that was asked this time, the re-urbanization debate, and what were the causes, political, social, economic, all those things. At least these 4 parts are there. But let us not go to the generic template of urbanization. We'll do that when we come to the 6th century BCE, and I will give you a generic template of how to approach such questions on urbanization from different era with changing evidences and era specificities. Let us come back to Harappa only. In Harappa also, it has its own specificities. Let us look at them for a moment, and we'll come to know what are those based on the previous year questions. So as we do at the beginning of every discussion, let us get a running review of all the PYQs on this topic. If you see in this topic on Harappa, generally every year at least one question is asked. If you collect the questions of last 20-25 years, you come to know that of all the questions, 2/3 questions, 66% questions are on either origin of Harappa or decline of Harappa, and only 1/3 questions are on other aspects like trade, commerce, religion, settlement, urban topography, urban settlement, planning, everything. They are only 1/3 in size, and 2/3 are only on origin and decline. So that becomes a very important topic. Now, if you take the questions on origin and decline, I have categorized them in certain types. Some questions are purely on origin. What are the causes, the debates, the theories of origin, either generically, or they might pick up one theory and ask you an opinion. We have some questions which are only on the origin. We have some question, the one that was asked last year, 15 marker, where you are asked together origin and decline. So here you don't need more content. What you need is a precise language and conceptual clarity. The data you might already have, you won't have much scope because of word limit to go into much detail. How briefly you are able to bring out your argument which are solid. That is the test over here. Then you go to some questions which are only about decline. They have been more numerous. In that, the questions sometimes are clubbed with the features of urban civilization and decline. And sometimes they come purely on decline and various theories and the debates. We have also some questions on decline and survival. What happened in the post-urban Harappan phase? It was not abrupt decline, it survived, it migration, degraded, all those things. The survival question, in what form it survived and in what reason it declined, they are clubbed. So we have such few questions, 4 of them. And then there is some question only on pure survival. So these are the main questions. We'll go through them, and in today's discussion and in tomorrow's we'll get an idea briefly about most of them. And then the other questions on features and characteristics, which we'll discuss tomorrow. Now come to the topic at hand. It is a very interesting topic, and we generally tend to get very confused because not the topic is difficult, but in most books the things are not simplified enough, and we tend to think we have understood when we have actually not understood the topic. You see, there are debates about Harappan origin, all of us know. There are at least four issues, four main theories. The first theory is the oldest theory, that is Mesopotamian origin or the foreign origin. Now, this theory is now completely discarded. The theory emerged in 1930s, 40s, 50s only, and it has its multiple versions. The first version was that the people themselves migrated from the west to India and they settled. The citadels which are created are nothing but areas of foreign domination, and the lower town is by Indians. So people themselves physically migrated. And we have later on theories by V. Gordon Child, that is the idea scheme that the Mesopotamian civilization urbanized first and they created a model, they gave an idea, and when Indians came in contact with them, we learned from them, we copied them. So that is a primary urbanization, and ours is a secondary urbanization. So both these theories actually have two important fundas beneath them. The first funda is that they are something called as diffusionist. So it is a typical anthropological paradigm where something originates at one point and then it spreads everywhere. And diffusionist paradigm is now in many cases not very good template to use. There are many arguments against it. And the second funda that underlies these arguments is imperialism. Imperialism. The British masters used to say continuously that we have come here to civilize Indians. That is our civilizing mission. And that propaganda went on for more than a century, which cemented their rule in India. And suddenly in 1920s, when they found that India was already civilized thousands of years ago, and they could not tolerate that. So they came up period, no, आप थे ही नहीं, हमने सिखाया आपको, हमारे लोग आए, हमारी आइडिया थी. So it was original colonization in that sense. So it is a now discarded colonial idea. Mesopotamian origin, both of them. It's an old idea. Then we have other two theories. One is Aryan origin. It is highly politicized and debatable. And then we have Dravidian origin. To be very honest, Dravidian origin debate is not very solid yet. Last year, a book came by Balakrishna Murthy, Balasubramaniam something, I don't. It's a blue book, the thick tome of around 2000 rupees. I purchased it, but I haven't read it yet, where he tries to talk about the Dravidian origin of Harappa. Even Iravatan Mahadevan at a point of time had attempted to, after making the concordance ready of Harappan script, connect it to Dravidian languages, but that thing is still not substantiated. So these two theories are presently highly inconclusive, possibly more politicized and less academic. We don't know. So I personally don't expect a lot of questions coming from these two theories as far as the origin of Harappa goes. And then we have the fourth theory, which is of gradual indigenous evolution. Gradual indigenous evolution. Now, in all this calculus, look at the question again for a moment. To what extent you give credit to Mesopotamian trade for Harappan civilization, Harappan urbanization? Now, where do you put this question in these four theories? Can you guess? Is it a part of Mesopotamian origin? No, because it was about migration of people or migration of ideas. It does not talk about trade. So this idea of Mesopotamian trade is not part of this original debate. It is an old debate. It may come up quite often with new evidences coming into light, but Mesopotamian trade is a very specific argument that is inside the gradual evolution. So now let me give you an idea of what this gradual evolutionary theory is. After my discussing for next few minutes, when the entire pus manzar, entire canvas is clear to you, then I will discuss the question once again and how you should have approached it. But this background creation is very important. You see, in gradual evolutionary theory, which started to come into being after 1960s and 70s, then a lot of excavation was done, especially post-partition era. After partition, Indians got dismayed that how come we don't have the major cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, on our side. So the origin of India was in Pakistan. And the origin of Islamic culture, the highest point of Islamic culture, the Mughal culture, many monuments were in India. So partition was a brutal thing. But anyway, in 60s and 70s, government funded a lot of excavation activity, and we discovered many sites from Dholavira to Kalibangan, Rakhigadi. All these sites came gradually from 60s, 70s onwards. And then the picture emerged. Many more sites also were found on India's side. On the Pakistan side, many Europeans and American archaeologists came for study, and they brought a lot of data. So the picture started emerging, whereby we came to know that it is a phased gradual evolution. I have a table over here where you can see the phases. We have early Harappan phase, then we have some transition, mature Harappan phase, and decline. Now these are the terms that we accept ready-made today. But when the sudden Mesopotamian origin theory was propounded by British in 1950s, at that time we had not found the early Harappan phase. It was not known to us. It is only in 60s and 70s this phase came to light, and then we come to know that mature Harappan phase does not begin suddenly. It has antecedents. It has its own evolutionary thing, and that thing was, although originally it was called pre-Harappan, from 1970s, 80s onwards, the scholars started to call it early Harappan. So it was initially called pre-Harappa. Now we call it early Harappa, and the very existence of early Harappa proves that it is an indigenous civilization that gradually evolved. But how did it evolve? That begs some question. So you have initially Neolithic era. Neolithic phase. In this phase, what do we have? Prosperous village communities, right? Let us take this as initial phase. From there we go to early Harappa. Which can be proven very easily with the help of archaeology. From here you go to mature Harappa. Let us stop here only because our syllabus is of today for this question is only till this point. What happens afterwards, we'll see tomorrow. Now, if you look at timeline, we have around 5,500 to 3,300 BCE. Then from 3,300 to around 2,600 BCE. From 2,600 to around 1,800 BCE or 1,900 maybe, 100 years here and there. The question is that how this evolved from the Neolithic villages to mature Harappan urbanization, and that evolution you can very well see has happened in two phases. The first phase is from Neolithic to early, and second transition is from early to mature. Now, how come these villages come into being? First of all, let me make it little over here. Yeah. If you see these settlements, the most famous example is Mehergarh. Mehergarh is the first Neolithic village in India. It comes from the northwestern borderland of India. When it came into being, you come to know they are able to use fertile soil very easily. They have also started to use stone quarries for better stone tools, and the prosperous village communities come into being because of tools and agriculture. That is the Neolithic revolution, initial era. Then you come to early Harappa. Now, if you look at the archaeological assemblage of early Harappa, its material culture is already well evolved. There are many things which are seen in early Harappa and mature Harappa. For example, you have already use of bricks. You already have use of copper. You already have use of wheels for transportation technology. We have wooden plow. We have some regional trade. So all these things are already there in the early Harappa. Now, this early Harappa is not one village or two villages. These are regional cultures. Regional cultures spread across entire, which later became mature Harappa region. Where are those? If you look at the map, then one region is here, one is over here, one is over here, and one is over here. We have Dam Sadat, a typical type site by which we know this culture, because when Mehergarh declined, and then near Quetta or Quetta as we call in English, we have these settlements coming up. We have here Amri and Nal culture. Here we have Port Diji culture, and here we have Kalibangan culture. Or nearby you have Kothi Siswal sites as well. Right? So we have these 4 regional cultures emerging, which are collectively called as early Harappan cultures. These are 4 different cultures based on the similarity of their pottery or some other artifacts. So you can imagine it like something like the 6th century BCE North India, where you have Mahajanpadas, 16 Mahajanapadas, right? Something of that kind with some difference in your material culture. The first question that it begs is, how did it come about? From these Neolithic sites, which were earlier village communities, to the early phase, how did this transition come? The transition happened through both material factors and socio-political non-material factors. So if you want to list those factors, you can list them. For example, material, I discussed already, we have wooden plow, you have trade, you have craft, etc. And in non-material, let me write just for a moment, material and non-material. Material factors can very easily be found out in archaeology. Non-material, we have to speculate, we have to guess. Are you able to follow me? I am yet to come to the question. I am yet to begin to come to the point where the question begins. I am creating a background. So in non-material, we have generally priests, their possible roles. We have rulers, we have traders, we have social organization, we also have ideology. We don't know. Somehow people started to collaborate, cooperate, organize themselves on better scale, possibly due to some environmental factors or some other factors. The surplus gold was extracted and again accumulated and distributed. Either the kings and administrators did that or the priest class do that, we don't know. But either material factors or non-material factors or both of them collectively ensured that there is a gradual evolution from the Neolithic settlements to early Harappa. Now begins the real question. Here, so far, there is no problem, there is no dispute. The real debate starts with the next phase. How come this transition come about? How did this happen? And that is what the question is about. If you look at the material culture, this transition from early Harappa to mature Harappa has happened relatively quickly in a matter of 100 years. Alchin and Alchin, if you have seen that great book, South Asia edition, Raymond Alchin and the other Alchin, both of them have given a term called as paroxysmal. मतलब सडन से स्पीड आई, जैसे कि अचानक से कपकपी आती है, उस तरह from early to mature very soon, in a matter of 100 to 150 years, around 2600 BCE. This change happened. And that change is great change, great transition suddenly happening, and it is not uniform. All these four different cultures are now coming together to form single culture, single material culture. Now in the mature phase, you have uniform bricks, uniform weights, uniform script, all of that is there. In mature culture, you have the number of signs increasing in number, so that you have written script which is completely evolved. So material culture becomes uniform across mature Harappa and remains constant and unchanged for 600-700 years. So in 100 years, so many changes take place in between. So we call it as a transition phase. And then once the changes have taken place, for the next 700 years, there are no changes. It is complete conservatism, ekdam no change. So both of them are puzzles. Rather, these two are this one, the transition, the causative factors behind the transition from early to mature. That is the missing piece in the puzzle of the gradual evolutionary theory. And it is here we have various discussions. First of all, understand what all changes took place in that transition. And then we'll talk about what are the various theories, one of which is Mesopotamian trade. So when a question is asked about the contribution of Mesopotamian trade, the question is actually asking you, did it or did it not, or to what extent it was the dominant agent in the transition phase between early Harappa and mature Harappa? That is the question. Because when you say Harappa urbanization came into being, we by default mean the mature phase came into being. Because we recognize Harappa by its mature urban features. Although these sites are already urban, maybe relatively less urban than mature, they have less homogeneity, but they already have elements of urbanity. The difference between early and mature is that in mature, over a larger region, there is much more uniformity that remains constant for much larger duration. That is mature phase. Anyway, first understand this transition phase between early and mature, which was around 100 years only, around 2600 BCE. Is it not interesting? Did you know all these things? Acha. So in Upinder, you would see that there is a small paragraph given where they talk about what happened in transition. You have early phase, you have mature phase, and there were some sites which were in the early era which did not continue in mature era. For example, in Cholistan, only 4 out of 23 sites continued, others were completely abandoned. What happened to those sites? Abandoned suddenly. Then you have some sites which continued in both the eras, but there are very few of them. Hardly, you can count them on your fingers. Then you have some sites, rather many sites, which were completely settled anew for the first time. Many sites which seem to be completely planned without having any early phase at all. And then there are some sites which have the early phase, which also have the mature phase, but they don't have organic continuity like this. They have a phase in between where there is destruction and reoccupation, recreation, mostly by burning down the entire city. As if they don't like city, let us finish it, Thanos, and create a new city. That is what has happened. So almost in 70-80% sites, mature phase is anew. What happened? That is the question. And second thing is that mature phase comes when there is gradually something called as cultural convergence. By here culture, I mean material cultural convergence. So when you have the map of India, you have these earlier 4 regional types that I discussed about. Now, if you go by craft, if you go by pottery, if you go by bricks, everything which was earlier different in these 4 areas, now it becomes one unified whole with very less regional diversity. The cultural convergence has taken place. Question is that who did that and why it happened? Who was the agent? Who was the catalytic factor in that cultural convergence? Was it Mesopotamian trade? That is the question. Now let us look at the theories. We have three major theories or three major groups of theories which talk about how this transition came about so quickly and what were the main dominant actors. The first theory is Mesopotamian trade. Mesopotamian trade. Now, in this theory, you see, this theory is not the one which I discussed earlier. Here we discussed migration and ideas coming from Mesopotamia when we had no idea of the early Harappan phase. Now we know there is early Harappan. There is already cultural evolution going on. Now the question is why so much destruction and why sudden transition? And in that, from the back door, a new theory again came of foreign hand theory. So in this, this theory came for the first time in 1970s and 80s when a lot of excavation was done on the in the Western Asia, and some Harappan artifacts were found there, which brought to our notice that there was a substantial amount of trade between India and Mesopotamia back then. And the main propounder of this theory is Shirin Ratnagar. So Shirin Ratnagar, a very respectable archaeologist, she is the one who is the main propounder of this theory. And it talks not about idea and people, but about trade, which bringing prosperity. There is a continuous debate varying almost on the boundary of personal enmity between Shirin Ratnagar on one hand and D.K. Chakravarti on the other hand. And I have seen lectures of both of them, and sometimes they also make personal attacks on each other. So Shirin Ratnagar would say that who gave this Oxford writing authority to Dilip Chakravarti? And Chakravarti would say some Indian scholar goes even to suggest that Harappan civilization did not only depend on Mesopotamian trade, rather acted as a raw material supplier of the Mesopotamian people. तो उनका आपस में झगड़ा चलते रहता है. We are not worried about that. Point is that Ratnagar says this is the main dominant factor which is countered by Dilip Chakravarti, D.K. Chakravarti on four important grounds. The first ground, D.K. Chakravarti says, where is the data to prove that it was substantial? By finding out a few artifacts here and there in grave goods and few mentions in literature of Mesopotamia, it does not give us any quantifiable data of how much substantial the trade really was. We don't know. So the first question is, where is the data to prove that it was of such a volume that it can even transition the entire civilization from early to mature? The second point, he says that with increased evidences, it comes to our notice that for a large part, the trade between Harappan people and Mesopotamian people was not even direct. Many people from the Gulf region, Bahrain, Falaika region, etc., they acted as middlemen, intermediaries. So they must have cornered some benefit, some profit. So it was not even a direct trade, it was largely indirect trade. And then making it the main reason for entire civilization is not correct. The third thing he says, that where are the evidences of Harappan Mesopotamian trade in the early Harappan era? Zilch. It seems that trade actually became substantial only after Harappan civilization had become mature. So Mesopotamian trade, as per Dilip Chakravarti, is concomitant. It evolves along with Harappan urbanization. It is not the cause of Harappan urbanization. It is actually the consequence. So it is not antedating it. It is going in concomitant manner. The third thing. And then the fourth thing he says, that with increasing excavations and explorations in different parts of India, now we have come to know that a much more intense trade was carried out by Hadappans in India only, with many other regional cultures in West UP, in Rajasthan, in North Deccan, etc. These are the areas of raw material source. And Indian subcontinent is very rich in all types of raw material except for barring one, not like silver or tin, etc. All other raw material is found locally, which was procured by Hadappans very efficiently. So Hadappan regional trade, intra-regional trade was much more intense than the external trade. And that internal trade can be one of the reasons for becoming mature. So these are the four arguments given by D.K. Chakravarti to demolish this theory. This seems quite rational. Then even Jim Schaffer says, the line given by Upinder Singh in her book, Jim Schaffer says that Harappan Mesopotamian trade was neither intensive nor extensive. But anyway, then what is the second theory? The second theory is technology. Now, this theory is given by partly Begotten Child earlier, when he talks about pottery and all other things. But now the main proponent of this theory is Dilip Chakravarti himself. What does DKC says? DKC says that there are two main factors. Now, this part is given very well in IGNOU material. There are two main factors. One is craft specialization. Craft specialization that leads to differentiation in society, which acts as the major point for the urbanization. He even talks about craft specialization becoming catalyzed because of the increasing metallurgical technology in the Rajasthan region, Khetri region. And the second point he says is about irrigation. Hadappans gradually learned, developed irrigation techniques, how to harness the recurring flood water in Indus plain, and that ability gives them control over water, irrigation, and therefore much better food surplus. And these two things, craft specialization and better irrigation system, these two acted as the basis to catapult Harappan civilization from early to mature. Now, for this, both of these, either you have data from the archaeology. In this side, you can find some material remains in Mesopotamia, or here you can really find some craft, some tools, some products, some irrigation techniques. So both of them come into the same realm of archaeology, and both of them, Sirin Ratnagar and Dilip Chakravarti, both of them are primarily archaeologists only. There comes the third factor also, a third group of theories also, which talk about role of society, polity, and ideology. So here we have socio-political, ideological factors. And in this, you have a main impediment that you cannot read Harappan script yet. And archaeology is not capable of giving you this data. You have to just infer it, speculate it logically. Beyond a point, you can't prove it, but we know it must have been there to some extent, because no changes are purely technological or material nature. You have non-material factors also. In this, we have three main proponents. The first one is an old theory by Amalananda Ghosh in 1965. A very old theory. Amalananda Ghosh, we know 46 wala pottery culture जिसने study किया था. He was, I guess, at that time DG ASI also in 1960s. He talks about why this sudden confluence of culture takes place in these four regional early Harappan cultures. He says it is because there was a great dictator, like Hitler tha, and he wanted to compete with Mesopotamian people. So he became aggressive. He waged some kind of policy because of which he brought all of them together. Now we don't know, we can't prove that. Right? This is just a speculation. Allied theory is given by Irfan Habib. Irfan साहब पता नहीं कहाँ theory देके गए आज तक. In medieval, even in nationalism, modern India, in Ancient also he has done quite a bit amount of work. So Irfan Habib has said that there was a warfare between these four regional cultures. He presumes that these four early Harappan cultures are four different monarchies or some kind of state systems. We don't know monarchies or not, some kind of state system, and there's a war. And ultimately, one emerged victorious, conquered all of them, and enforced from top down some uniformity of material culture. And which one of them must have emerged victorious? Maybe there is the least amount of change in Harappa compared to other regional cultures. So rulers of Harappa became prominent and they conquered everybody else. And how come we know? Because we have mass burning down. So many towns were burned and again newly built. It has to be some kind of conquest of political conquest. No, we can't prove that because the major flaw in this theory, there are very less amount of weapons which we have found. If there are so less weapons, we won't see that it was a lot of warfare or military affair. And third theory is about rituals. This theory also tries to somehow prove why or speculate why this mass scale burning down was done. Here it seems that outsiders, one of the four cultures came, it conquered the other three and burnt them down. Here, this theory says that no outsider came. The people themselves who came under a new kind of ideology, they wanted to bring new cities. They had new ideas of how the lanes should be, how the sanitation should be, how the houses should be, how the grid pattern should be, how the water supply should be. So they came, they decided, let us destroy the city and build it anew. So people themselves did it based on some social organization and some ideology which we cannot know. So this thing will remain unresolved till we have access to Harappan literature. We don't have a Gilgamesh of that era as we have on clay tablets in Mesopotamia. But anyway, these are the main three theories about the transition from early to mature. Now come back to question and you see the question very closely. To what extent you give credit to Mesopotamian trade for Harappan urbanization? Now the picture is quite clear. Let us try to solve the question. I have some ideas here. How would I introduce this question? I come with 3-4 introductions. First, a very simple introduction. Due to the dearth of sufficient literary material, the veil of mystery prevails. So, whatever questions you come across in Harappan era, those questions come from some debatable context, and debate exists primarily because you have less access to data, which is because you don't have literature available to you, which is because you have not read the script. So, a stock introduction for many questions about Harappa is the dearth of literary material, so veil of mystery remains. Typical introduction. The second, that's why the theory of Mesopotamian origin caught the attention of other scholars as well. But before coming to any conclusion, we need to explore the evidence. So you are giving a thesis. You are giving a hint of what you are going to do in the answer without giving the conclusion in the beginning. It is a very good standard conclusion, standard introduction. Then you have, in the success of any urban civilization, trade is supposed to be a very important factor. As Harappan civilization maintained its contact with the region of West Asia on regular basis, therefore some scholars believe that the role of Mesopotamian trade was instrumental behind the rise of urbanization. But based on new research, this view is being challenged. Again, this third line is very important. It gives a hint towards where your answer is going to be. You should learn to write that line, thesis and post-thesis. But anyway, you have two other good introductions which you can write if you really know the topic and you want to tell the examiner, you see, this is how I will tell you that I have conceptual clarity of the topic. As per the latest research, gradual indigenous origin is among the most acceptable theories. However, the positive agents for the shift during the transition phase from early to mature are still some of the missing pieces of the puzzle. Perfect introduction. In one line, you give it and you create the debate in front of you. Similarly, in Harappan zone, a remarkable cultural convergence happened within a short period of time around 2600 BCE, which brought cultural uniformity between various regional early settlements. How was this brought about is still, grammar is wrong, still baffles the scholars and is a very hotly debated issue. In both these introductions, what you are making clear is that you are aware of the short 100 to 150 years of transition phase between early and mature and debates around it. You have also located the debate in that chronological era. If you can do that, the examiner gets very happy that he knows that you know what is the question all about. It is not, if you are comparing this Mesopotamian origin with migration of people or ideas or Aryan or sudden origin, it is not about sudden origin. In traditional sense, those are the old debates, these are the new debates. How to connect early to mature is the debate in 2020s. Now, in the body, you can have two parts. In the first part, you talk about the Mesopotamian trade given by Shirin Ratnagar. You should mention Ratnagar if you know. If you don't know, it is completely fine. And because it says with examples in the question, give some examples of evidences you find in the West about the trade. If you mention that, generally the evidences are found in Mesopotamia about Harappa, but we have not found concomitant examples or evidences of Mesopotamia in Harappa. It seems more of one-way trade. Harappa is more of export-oriented economy. It doesn't import much from the West, as it also was there in the ancient times in later era. Nonetheless, limitations of the argument. However, after close examination, one can underline the following flaws in this true of Mesopotamian trade argument. You give those 4 arguments of D.K. Chakravarti that I gave, and then in the conclusion, you can conclude in various ways. If you don't want to go there, by there I mean over here, you can give only Ratnagar's view with evidences. Evidences you will find abound in any book of Mesopotamian trade. And then you give 4 points in opposition and conclude it that it was not very substantial. That is a good conclusion. Or else what you can do, you can write this debate in the main body, and then in the conclusion, in 1 or 2 lines at max, not more than that. In this question, we don't have room for that. In 1 or 2 lines, you give hint of these other factors. If you do that, that also is a good conclusion. So, thus, there is no question of giving the credit for rising urbanization to Mesopotamian trade. Clear-cut stance. That is why the view of Mesopotamian trade as decisive factor behind Harappan urbanization does not appear to be convincing. Clear-cut stand. You end it there. You don't have to go to second and third kind of theories. You may do that also if you want. Limited role was of trade more as a consequence than as a cause. Again, good conclusion. Complex phenomenon with host of factors acting together, and then you give a hint of other theories of D.K. Chakravarti's ideas of irrigation and craft specialization, or great dictator, warfare, or rituals, the socio-political factors which we cannot know till we decipher the script and have more literature. This is a very simple structure. Most of you have followed some different idea. Many of you have also drawn maps, beautiful maps. It is a good thing to do. If you show Harappan zone, Mesopotamian zone, and some trade with arrows, etc., and couple of sites here, couple of Ur, Nippur, etc. sites there, it would be good, no doubt. The point is, in this 15 marker, you are not supposed to dwell on the details of Mesopotamian trade. The question is not primarily about what all evidences, what all commodities, what all trade routes of export, import, so some land routes, some sea routes, these are the ports. Those details you should give over here at this phase in hardly 3-4 lines, half a page at max, not more than that. The question is not primarily about the archaeological evidence of Mesopotamian trade. Don't go there beyond the point. Give 2-3 points, move on, and give that debate and provide the conclusion. Am I clear? Chalo. Thank you.